Dear students, today we are beginning from page number 29. I will be starting from the middle of the first paragraph. In this session, we are dealing with two popular tests. For what these tests are conducted? These tests are conducted for evaluating the literary value of a text by a formalist critic. Let us see what is there in the text. As consequences of the distinction just referred to, the formalist critic rejects two popular tests for literary value. So I enhance and you also underline. The formalist critic rejects, underline that, rejects two popular tests for literary value. So here what is he talking about? Brooks is talking about two popular criteria that readers do for evaluating a literary text. So one is concerned with the author, the other is concerned with the reader. So let us see what is there in the text. The first proves the value of the work from the author's sincerity or the intensity of the author's feelings as he composed it. So there is a tendency in the reader to value a text based on the sincerity of the author who has written that text. And Brooks says that is not a criteria to evaluate a literary text. If we heard that Mr. Guest testified that he put his heart and soul into his poems, we would not be very much impressed, though I should see no reason to doubt such a statement from Mr. Guest. So suppose Mr. Guest is an author and the author speaks to us that he has put all his heart and soul into the text when he has written it. Just listening to what the author says about his sincerity, we cannot evaluate a literary text. Then how can we evaluate a literary text? It can be evaluated only if it is found in the process of the reading by the reader. It should not be told by the author. And he gives us an example of Ernest Hemingway. It would be critically irrelevant. Ernest Hemingway's statement in a recent issue of Time magazine that he counts his last novel his best is of interest for Hemingway's biography. But most readers of Across the River and Into the Trees would agree that it proves nothing at all about the value of the novel. That in this case, the judgment is simply pathetically inapt. So what does he say about Ernest Hemingway? And by the way, we have to understand who is Ernest Hemingway. And there is a note given in the bottom of the page. Note number 9. Ernest Hemingway. The lifespan is given 1899 to 1961. Hemingway is the 1954 Nobel laureate. He was an American novelist, best known for The Old Man and the Sea and For Whom the Bell Tolls. So these are the two very famous novels by Ernest Hemingway. He is an American author. Once, Ernest Hemingway made a comment about his last novel. What was the comment? He says that it is the most important novel that he has written, or it is the best novel that he has written. Ernest Hemingway had made such a comment in an issue of the Time magazine. And what was the response of the readers to it? The readers couldn't find that novel as the best written by Ernest Hemingway. So this is an example for the first popular text made by the readers. I will go through those portions again. Ernest Hemingway's statement in a recent issue of Time magazine that he counts his last novel his best is of interest for Hemingway's biography. When we read about the biography of Hemingway, this point that he himself, the author Hemingway himself, had made in an interview to the Time magazine, that is very relevant. But most readers of Across the River and Into the Trees, Across the River and Into the Trees is the last novel Hemingway referring to. And the readers of this novel, they don't find it as the best of Hemingway. But most readers of Across the River and Into the Trees would agree that it proves nothing at all about the value of the novel. That in this case, the judgment is simply pathetically inept. What is the meaning of inept? Not apt. So, if an author says that he has put all his heart and soul into the work and he has written a work of art very sincerely, that doesn't mean that that particular text is the most valuable text written by him. So there is a tendency among the readers to make such a popular test of a literary work. So this is the first popular test that the formalist critic rejects. Now we are moving to the next test, and it is something related to the reader. Let us see what it is. We discount also such tests for poetry as that proposed by A.E. Housman. The bristling of his beard at the reading of a good poem. The intensity of his reaction has critical significance only in proportion as we have already learned to trust him as a reader. So what does Brooks say here? Who is A.E. Housman? Again, go to the notes. Note number 10. A.E. Housman, 1859 to 1936, is an English poet best known for his cycle of poems, The Shropshire Lad. So Housman is an English poet. We discount also such tests for poetry as that proposed by A.E. Housman. A.E. Housman says, we have to value a literary work if it could generate an impact upon the reader. And he says, the bristling of his beard at the reading of a good poem. What do we understand by that? What is the meaning of bristling? Page number 36. To be visibly roused or stirred. For example, suppose you are reading a poem. You are so much thrilled by the content of the poem and you feel a sort of thrill in your mind. Okay, sometimes it will give you goosebumps even. So that is the impact that poem was able to create in the mind of you as a reader. Sometimes it will be the bristling of the beard. Sometimes it will be the goosebumps on the reader. But it doesn't mean that that particular work is a valuable work because it gives the reader goosebumps or bristling of the beard, because that is very subjective. That is a very subjective analysis of a literary work. So such tests of analyzing or evaluating a literary text based on the subjective experience of the reader is also not something that is taken into consideration. Such tests are also rejected by the formalist critics. We'll go to it again. Let us see. We discovered also such tests for poetry as that proposed by A. Housman. The bristling of his beard at the reading of a good poem. The intensity of his reaction has critical significance only in proportion as we have already learned to trust him as a reader. So, the intensity of reaction of a particular reader is only based on what kind of a reader he is. Even so, what it tells us is something about Housman, nothing decisive about the poem. So that is a very important thing. Underline, what it tells us is something about Housman. If A. Housman reads a text and he feels a bristling of his beard, that particular reaction talks something about A. Housman, the reader, not about the text. So according to the formalists, they are severing the author and also the reader from the text and concentrating only on the text. So if we try to value a text based on the impact that text creates upon the reader, then that test cannot be accepted. And thus the formalist rejects that kind of a text solely based on the reaction upon the reader. That is what here Brooks says. Now, going to the next paragraph. It is unfortunate if this playing down of such responses seems to deny humanity to either writer or reader. He understands that. So here we are just trying to reject the role of the writer and the reader, and we are just trying to concentrate upon the text. So that doesn't mean that we are altogether rejecting humanity in general. The critic may enjoy certain works very much and may be indeed intensely moved by them. I am, and I have no embarrassment in admitting the fact. But a detailed description of my emotional state on reading certain works has little to do with indicating to an interested reader what the work is and how the parts of it are related. So here Brooks is saying his own situation. Cleanth Brooks is a critic. And I told you he is trying to place a critic in the position of an ideal reader. So, a critic will also have his own subjective positions when he reads a text. Those subjective positions are only related to the critic, not related to the text. That is what he is trying to discuss here. I repeat those statements. See whether you can understand. The critic may enjoy certain works very much and may be indeed intensely moved by them, just like the reader. I am. Brooks says, I was also interested or impressed by certain works. And I have no embarrassment in admitting the fact. But, the problem lies here, but A detailed description of my emotional state on reading certain works has little to do. Little means nothing to do. Little means nothing. Nothing to do with indicating to an interested reader what the work is and how the parts of it are related. So in this session, we are talking about the two popular tests for literary value that the formalist critics reject. So one is concerned with the author. We have seen the example of Ernest Hemingway. The other is related with the reader. We have seen the example of Houseman. So with this, I end this session. We will continue our lesson in the coming sessions. Thank you.